Guys, hope you're well. It's Liam Sheriff here from liamsheriff.com, and in today's video blog post I'm going to introduce the concept of the hormone dominance factor for fat loss. I'm going to basically show you which hormones are responsible for storing fat in which particular areas, and hopefully dismiss the myth that states that you can simply overtrain a particular area of your body to spot reduce the body fat percentage there. That myth is quite far away from the truth, and the reason for that is simply because hormones essentially decide where on your body you store fat, and all food actually is used to create hormones, which basically means if your nutrition isn't correct, you'll never ever be able to reduce fat in one particular area if that subsequent hormone is not brought under control. So simply training that area over and over again, but basically disregarding nutrition and the hormone factor will never ever get you the result that you want. So like I say, it's a bit of a myth, and today I'm going to explain exactly why. Okay, so first of all we're going to discuss what actually stores where, so which hormones are responsible for storing fat in which areas of your body. Now, just to keep it nice and simple, I've got a nice little diagram here. On the left hand side we have an arrow pointing to the bust area of women, or the man boob area of males, with the word estrogen next to it. Now, estrogen is a female hormone, and extremely high levels of estrogen can lead to fat storage in that particular area. Not only that, if you become estrogen dominant, then you put yourself at greater risk of breast cancer, females. So basically making sure that estrogen levels are low and regulated is vitally important, not only for fat storage but also for your health as well. We move now down to cortisol. We've discussed cortisol quite a lot over the last couple of weeks on the blog, but cortisol is responsible for storing fat on the stomach. I'm actually going to record a series of these videos going through each individual area and each individual hormone. So today is generally all about cortisol, so we'll move quickly on to the tricep area and come back to cortisol in a moment. But if you don't have triceps that are visible, or you are a female with bingo wings and that's your big hang up and big problem, then that suggests to me that estrogen is too high, which subsequently means growth hormone and testosterone levels are low. Despite testosterone being a male hormone, depending on which research you read, women have around a tenth or even up to a 20th of the testosterone men have, so significantly increasing the levels certainly wouldn't put hairs on your chest or any of the other myths that you certainly hear about. Next we move down onto the love handles and the back fat area. Again, if that's your problem, then generally you might be very insulin sensitive. So insulin is the hormone that's responsible for storing fat there. And again we move further down to estrogen, which is pointing to the sort of ass area but also the legs, which I know from there upwards to about the waist is generally a female's worst part of the body. And estrogen is basically responsible for storing fat in that particular area. So over the next couple of weeks we're going to delve into these particular hormones in greater detail. However, today we're going to finish and basically tie up cortisol and basically wrap up what we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks. Okay, so hormone number one, the simple cortisol problem. Now, one of the things I'm quite sort of keen on when I'm teaching and coaching is to keep things extremely simple. Okay, so I'm going to make this nice and easy for you to follow, and number one is simple. Okay, so cortisol, as we said before, is responsible for storing fat on the stomach. So if the muffin top of abdominal fat is your big problem at the moment, then you generally have too high levels of cortisol. Your cortisol levels are too high generally because of the following things: caffeine, stimulants, lack of sleep and stress. These are the things that basically spike cortisol the most, amongst others. Cortisol is also a catabolic hormone. In one of the blog posts recently I mentioned how cortisol can be quite damaging and wasting of muscle tissue, and muscle tissue is the only tissue in your body that actually burns fat and maintains your metabolism, subsequently burning calories. So the less muscle tissue you have on your body, the slower and the less efficient your metabolic rate will run. So if you have constantly high levels of cortisol and you start basically breaking down the healthy muscle tissue, then you're going to find it even harder to drop fat, as opposed to just simply having high levels of cortisol in the first place, if that makes sense. So you want to preserve the muscle tissue, and you want to make sure that cortisol is kept basically regulated and kept low, so that we don't waste any of the tissue that helps us burn fat in the first place. Okay, if you have high cortisol, which is a fat storing hormone, it's quite common to have low testosterone, which is a fat burning hormone. So the idea is to basically raise levels of testosterone and reduce the levels of cortisol. Again, like I say, we're going to keep this very simple today, so I'm just going to give you a very simple solution to cortisol. Number one, if you want to reduce abdominal fat, then it's vitally important to reduce and control cortisol. No amount of sit-ups will actually reduce the fat and the abdominal region unless you bring the levels of cortisol down within your body. You need to avoid caffeine, stimulants, you need to correct and make a regular sleep pattern, and basically avoid, manage or reduce stress as much as you possibly can to reduce cortisol levels. If you want to waste fat burning tissue, then all you got to do is do the exact opposite to what we've just spoke about before. So for me, preservation of muscle tissue or fat burning tissue is vitally important, as I'm sure you'll agree. So doing the opposite will actually deplete that muscle tissue and actually make this process of losing fat from your stomach even harder. And sometimes if we can't simply work on reducing cortisol, then we need to work on increasing testosterone instead. So we've talked quite a lot about the different types of training you can do to basically produce a lot of testosterone and create a big radiation effect of hormones. So things like body weight circuits, basically getting in the gym, lifting weights, as opposed to doing things like cardio and prolonged aerobic endurance training, will basically help you increase levels of testosterone and reduce cortisol. So basically, to summarize, cortisol is basically responsible for all fat storage around the stomach and around the midriff, and also the the muffin top area. So if you really want to lose the fat that you have around the abs and basically reduce your stomach, then it's vitally important that we control cortisol, and just basically following these simple steps can go a very long way to making that happen. So that's it for day one, chaps. A very simple overview of cortisol and the hormones. In next week's video, we're going to talk about insulin, basically explain what's causing insulin to go high and why you can't get rid of the love handles. Hope that helps. Take care. Liam.